Hey everybody, Tony D and the Piney podcast. All right, today's numbers were about at 862, I think it was. The numbers at this point almost don't matter. Phil is pursuing his agenda regardless of the numbers going down, down, down. This very, very arduous, slow rollout of maybe kind of opening businesses, sort of, but never quite finishing. I think if he wanted to do the most damage to the economy, I think actually this is probably more damaging to the economy and best for his career, in that he could keep saying, well, we're opening, you just have to be patient. But, it just continues to frustrate everyone and add more costs to business, and probably in the long run won't even be all that effective once the studies really come out about, what is or is not effective regarding the virus. Now, a lot of the science is already in. The science came in, over a month ago. The virus dies in ultraviolet light and temperatures above the mid-70s. Gone. Can't survive on surfaces. In other words, if you touch a railing in the sun, this time of year, within seconds, it's virus free. If you leave stuff in your car, the car is usually open to the sun and it just fries everything, right? There's no way the virus could survive in that kind of heat. So, there's a lot of wisdom in the idea that, once the summer rolls around, a lot of this will go away. That seems to be the gist of it all. Phil, on the other hand, is taking his good old time gearing up to get us back to whatever we were. And if you know anything about restaurants, they're really about how many people you can bring in and serve and get out in a time period, right? So the idea that you could even run a restaurant at 50% capacity, it's insane. These restaurants run on capacity, right? You're not always at full capacity, but that's the goal. A place like a diner, for instance, that hits full capacity at certain times of the day, usually at breakfast and usually at dinner, sometimes at lunch. And you make your money when it's full, when it's Mother's Day or wherever. If your maximum capacity is half, well, you are really, you now have half the space, and that completely changes the math. If you doubled the prices, maybe, assuming people would pay those double prices for food, that's what it's all going to eventually spiral into, is some of these owners will just have to raise their prices to kind of compensate for the fact that they just can't get enough people into the damn place. And quite frankly, we could have done outside dining the moment it got warm. That was on the table the moment the U.S. government, federal scientists came out and said this. So Phil is like behind the curve, because it's not about opening businesses. It's not about saving you. It's not about anything other than politics. Politics, politics, politics. So what's the goal here? If the goal was to make the state strong and economically viable, he would have opened everything up. He has this strange idea of, once we help the public health, then somehow, the rest of everything else will come together. That's just not true. You could have a perfectly healthy population and a terrible economic situation. The two don't really necessarily affect one another. Now, if people are sick, obviously that could impact the economy poorly. But again, the science is in. The virus wasn't as bad as anyone thought. And again, for the first month, maybe two, people could say, well, we didn't know, you're fine. But now it's become a battle between the Democratic Party and Trump. And that's what it is, in my view. That he will do anything he can to make sure people are basically broke, because he needs to give Joe Biden as much ammo as possible. Because what else has Joe Biden got, right? When he goes up on that stage to debate Donald Trump, or if he goes behind a podium on a digital presentation, he's got to say something bad. And today's numbers, today's unemployment numbers are really, really good. Jobs actually rose. People went back to work in other states. In New Jersey, and not so much. And it was already tough to do business in New Jersey. Phil could maybe compensate or mitigate some of the damage by saying, okay, you don't have to pay for all these taxes. You don't have to pay these permits. You don't have to do X, Y, and Z, and cut bureaucratic costs in some other area. Maybe cut people's taxes for a year or forever, really, since people aren't using the facilities. Maybe there should be some savings there passed on. But you don't hear Phil talk about that because he's too busy pursuing his progressive agenda, which is, I got to make everybody healthy, everybody. Also, you could see the hypocrisy of allowing protesters to protest and, going on and on how it's every American's God-given right to protest, so no one should oppose this. Meanwhile, when Atlas Jim protested his decree, which was a decree, it wasn't a law, he called these guys knuckleheads. When the churches opened in defiance of his law, when a woman who ran a home goods store opened a Facebook auction, he sent the cops to close her down. This is what I mean. It's rules for certain people and rules for you, right? And I think the reason because of that is Phil and most of the Democrats perceive their base as the protesters. They perceive them, well, that's our base, so they get to do whatever they want. Oh, some guys who run a gym, F those guys. They probably weren't going to vote for us anyway. Oh, people who go to church, we don't cater to those people anymore. We're Democrats. F those people. Oh, people who have their own businesses, they're probably Republicans. Screw it. That's the calculation, in my view. The political calculation is, F everybody who doesn't want to vote for me, and anybody who does gets to do what they want. And in fact, what he's going to end up doing, sorry, I got a hair on my face. Oh, it's so annoying. What I think he's going to end up doing is asking Biden for a big old handout. But what if Biden doesn't get elected? What if he doesn't get elected? Well, they'll go back to their cushy lives because they were probably rich to begin with. And they'll leave somebody else to pick up the pieces. And when people go, well, didn't you destroy New Jersey? He'll say, well, it wasn't my fault. It was the virus, or it was Republicans, or whatever. But I think what you're going to see is a red tidal wave. I think you're going to see the DNC in New Jersey and in these other states across the country just collapse. And understand, you can't really run national campaigns without state apparatus. Okay? The people who ran Democratic organizations and Republican organizations, yes, they're fairly loyal, but they're also fairly moderate. They're people who work, people who are politicians, and some of them are mercenaries. And that means, well, they'll work for any political party. What do you think's going to happen as the Democrats start to crumble? You're going to see rats fleeing a sinking ship. You're going to see people just leave the Democrats high and dry. Why bother? They're on their way out. They've screwed the pooch. Who cares about them? It's time to get in with the Republicans while there's still time. That's what you're going to see. So it's not going to get better for them. It's going to get worse. And that's part of the reason they're doubling down. It's like, well, set the house on fire. We're going to do some damage before we're out of here. And people are going to give us money and elect us, or screw them, we're going to burn the whole thing down. This is why politicians don't care about you, because they're willing to do that. It's not their house. Phil will be fine. He'll skip right out and go, well, I was governor once. I'll go and get a job wherever and make a ton of money. Or maybe I'll retire. Maybe he's got tons of money. I don't know. What I do know is he'll never be held accountable for any of his mistakes. The only way to hold him accountable is to kick him out of office. That's the worst that'll happen to him. He'll be kicked out of office. He'll never be prosecuted for horrible mismanagement or making decisions that are strictly political and not in the best interest of the state of New Jersey. And maybe that should change. But, on the upside, if there's any upside to this, at least we're not in the shape that a lot of these other Democratic states are in. I mean, they're in rough shape. Minnesota's talking about, and Minneapolis is talking about abolishing police departments. At least we're not at that level. I mean, they've got super, super radical leftists coming in. As a libertarian, libertarians often talk about abolishing the police and replacing them with something more privatized, like private security firms. You would come into a neighborhood, the neighborhood would get together and decide, well, what kind of police force do we want, if any? Do we want local people? Do we want to hire a private security firm that we pay every month and that would be accountable to us? So, abolishing the police, sure, there's some merit in that discussion, but not when you're doing it like this. Not when you're just abolishing them thinking like, well, that'll solve the problem of racism. Everybody go home. No, it's not going to work that way. When you do this kind of stuff, well, you gotta sort of slowly roll into it. You gotta figure out how you're gonna do this. The city of Camden did that. They rolled out from a union police force that, in my view, was pretty corrupt and transitioned into a metro police force, which, isn't great, but seems to be doing better. I'd have to drill down to really know. Anyhow, before I rant any more about politics and whatnot, just know that South Jersey is going to get through this. We always have. It's going to be pretty much the same here. People kind of go about their business down here. We have a little more latitude because it's not so crowded. But people in North Jersey, you really, really got to start rethinking things with regard to Phil Murphy. Is your virtue signaling so important that you're going to keep electing progressives like Phil, empty suits like Phil, who just don't understand how to manage things? They don't understand basic economics. Look, I'm not for corporations running over the little guy at all. I want to see small businesses thrive. But you have to understand that these politicians, they make rules. And Phil's rules help the big corporate stores. His rules for malls, only the stores with outside exits, outside entrances. That's only the anchor stores at a mall. The big corporate stores. It's so obvious. Why would he make that rule? Well, so those corporate giants can keep getting their money, and all those little guys inside the store who run one little shop, a card shop or a t-shirt store, they're screwed. They can't open. They don't have an outside entrance. Some of them are on the second floor. You know the kinds of stores I'm talking about in these malls. Why is Phil doing it? Is he just that stupid? Well, that's one reason to get rid of him. But I think it's more than that. I think it's Phil is really beholden to those corporate interests. So you're not getting a guy who even understands or pushes his own supposedly progressive ideology. At least with people on the right side of politics, they understand basic economics. Most of them are businessmen. They want businesses to thrive. Now, do they pull stunts like this? Usually not, because mostly they're under intense scrutiny not to, like Trump's under intense scrutiny. I'm not against intense scrutiny, by the way. I am against journalists who just act like activists. But we got to really rethink this. And Phil is just screwing the pooch. So again, I urge you, email Phil. Email the state legislature and let's recall this knucklehead. Let's pressure him. Pressure him more and more until he opens this state. Because it's completely hypocritical for him to allow protesters march cheek to cheek while you can't even allow 2 customers in your store at a time? Come on. That is a huge hypocrisy. And I think most people can see it.